And the fourth thing I want to talk about is retrieval augmented generation. And that's RAG for short. It sounds like a big scary word, but all it means is you're giving a large language model like ChatGPT a database of information to draw on, to bring in first-person sources so that it is not just making things up, making facts up out of thin air. And I had mentioned this on a previous podcast I did about AI, the hallucination problem. It's a big deal. But I think retrieval augmented generation, RAG, is a great way to reduce hallucinations. And what it essentially does is when you give access to the database of information, you can ask the ChatGPT when it's, say, writing the blog about healthy cat food, instead of saying, just write whatever you feel like, write something convincing, ask for it to only draw on first-person sources or, citable sources. So it is only drawing on information that it is finding in the database. And that greatly reduces the hallucination problem. It's possible that it will give an irrelevant response, but it does avoid just making things up because you can always check, hey, where did you get that fact? And so it's also really great if you are a business owner or if you're operating in a company where you're like, hey, my employees, I don't want them to use ChatGPT because it doesn't seem that private. I don't want them talking to this AI and giving confidential information. When you set up a RAG system, you can essentially keep all your data secure and give the model access to it without giving it, total access, without dropping it all into the model so it's looking at everything. I think a great way to think about this is like a library versus someone who reads a lot of books. The AI model, it can read really, really fast, but it can't read like infinitely fast. So if you have an entire library, think of the biggest library you can imagine, it can't read all the books in a day. I mean, maybe if you want to load it up, it could read all the books in a year or something, maybe, a month or two. But it's going to be loaded up in its brain. It's going to slow down because it's having to draw on facts all the time. So the better answer is to say, hey, large language model, just here's the library. When you need information, you know where to go. You don't have to read all the books, but you can kind of sort it out and find the most relevant books when I ask you a question. So think of RAG as the library for a large language model, which is the reader, to draw on when it needs to. And the last thing I want to mention about retrieval augmented generation is that when an AI searches the web, that's what it's doing. So it is not this crazy concept. You don't need a big database of just your files. Anytime an AI is searching the web to bring you information, it is using the retrieval augmented generation. It's drawing on sources. Okay, and then the fifth and final term I'm going to mention in this episode is fine-tuning. Now, fine-tuning is essentially about making a model more efficient. And so it's about reducing token usage, making it cost less. But another way to think about this and where it would be relevant is, let's say you have a very specific use case for AI. You know that you only want to use this model to write a very, formulaic, say, thank you note. Let's say it's for your clients. You want a very formulaic thank you note, and once you want it to follow this model, one paragraph says this, paragraph 2 says this, paragraph 3 says that. But each time it's customized to, the client. They have different needs, different businesses, but you still want it to follow this very specific formula. And so what you do when you fine-tune a model, and it's not easy, I don't know how to do it personally, I just know how it works, is that you basically add some training examples, some training data that give it the pattern that you want it to follow. And so there's a very easy way to think about this if we think about simplifying AI. And imagine, you have a kid who's just learning about animals. And this kid is given a picture of a cat and given a picture of a dog. And it says, this one is cat, this one is dog. And now if you show new pictures, one's a cat, one's a dog, very likely, depending on the age of the kid, they'll be able to identify what's the cat and what's the dog like instantly. Just because we may not be able to articulate it, but okay, that looks like a cat, that looks like a dog. When we bring up fine-tuning an AI model, what you're essentially doing is, with what I said before, the generic thank you note that you want it to follow, you're giving that document to the AI and saying, okay, here's what my thank you notes need to look like. And here is the base information that was given. And that's how I got from point A to point B. And so you're saying, in the future, I'm going to give you these bullet points of this is the person, this is their company, this is what we did for them, and I want you to output something that looks like this. So it is essentially just creating a specific formula that allows you to reduce token usage. You don't have to explain what I just explained every single time, but you train it once like that, and then in the future, you only have to write 5 bullet points, and you're always going to get that perfect thank you note response. So I hope that's clear. It is about being efficient, because for the regular person, we're not really having to think about how many tokens we're using. But if you want to start talking about, using it 20 times a day for writing, 5 paragraph, 1,000-word essays, you do want to be as efficient as possible, because eventually you're going to get charged for how much you're using it. And even if you're not getting charged for token usage, it's about saving yourself time. You don't want to write out the long explanation every time. You just want it to learn the thing so you don't have to keep doing that teaching process every single time.
If you enjoyed that clip, I just have 3 things I want you to do. The first thing is hit subscribe, follow the channel for new content. Second thing, go and watch the full episode. If you like this clip, you're probably going to enjoy what I talk about in the entire podcast. And the third thing, which I think is the most important, go and buy my new book, Off With His Head. It's on Amazon right now. Not only is it the best way to support this channel and the content I'm making, but I truly believe that it is a foundational book, something that can provide you existential security in an increasingly polarized and radicalized and chaotic world. This is a book of hope for people who are stuck living with a cynical worldview. We are living at a time where our rational mind is actually short-circuiting because of all the information overload we're receiving. We need more silence and stillness, not more information. Wisdom comes from the gap between thoughts, the gap between sounds, the gap between the news. And that is what I want to convey in this book. So if that sounds appealing to you, then go right now, click the Amazon link, go and buy that book. You will thank yourself later.